What's up, gamers and geeks? Matt here with That's Fair Podcasting and Gaming Geeks Live. And man, if the last 5 or 6 years in the video game industry have taught us anything, it's, for one, never pre-order. Ever pre-order anymore. I mean, unless you know for sure, or it's from an indie developing team, sure, your odds are much better. But with everything that's gone on since at least 2020, the video game world has suffered, just like some of my favorite television shows and movies have all of a sudden gotten progressive and preachy. And I remember video games being a safe place to escape all this. What the hell happened? You know, as a child, video games meant to me more than just about anything. I mean, obviously, I was little. I played with toys. I had my G.I. Joes, my He-Man. I mean, growing up in the 80s, I had the best toy selection you could ask for. But video games were a huge thing that were on the rise, and it never had all this shit in it that we have blasted all over with preachy progressive bullshit. But if you are new here, please feel free to subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting or Gaming Geeks Live. Maybe like the video, help us out into that algorithm. Thank God. You guys are helping us out there. And to all the subscribers who have jumped on to That's Fair lately, thank you so much. That is massive. I cannot thank you enough. And if you don't do any of these things and you just watch this pointless video, that's what means the most to me. And thank you for joining me. And again, I am Matt. But I remember as a kid, man, you know, it started in the arcades. When I was walking, you know, I had an arcade not too far from where I lived in Norman, Oklahoma. I got what quarters I could scrounge up around the house. You had Midway's Pac-Man, you had Donkey Kong, you had Galaga. I mean, this is obviously the early stages of video gaming, and then the Atari would come out, and you know, you didn't have anything to worry about. As a kid, you went to school, you couldn't wait to get home. Now, a lot of you people watching, your console was probably the Nintendo Entertainment System. You know, mine was the Atari when I was about 10. And, you know, it progressed. When I turned 13, I got the Nintendo Entertainment System. And, you know, around the mid 80s, you know, again, your escape from reality were these video games, you know. And Nintendo really gave it to you with like Super Mario Brothers. You had, you know, I remember some like Choplifter and Excite Bike. They even brought Pole Position, an arcade classic, into the Nintendo Entertainment System. But I just remember like just loving these consoles. And again, you know, like I said, it was the Nintendo Entertainment System. I mean, these platforms made great games. And as we progressed into the later 80s, you know, you had a Sega system that came out in 88, which I got one of those, that was supposed to kind of keep up with the Nintendo. It didn't really. It was short-lived, but, you know, I had a bunch of great games there. And as I remember hitting my early 20s, in the early 90s, you know, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And that is one of the greatest to ever bring video games to my TV screen. And I remember playing these wonderful games. I remember playing Final Fantasy 1 and to 3 on the Super Nintendo. And, you know, it was my ex, Danielle, and I, we would play for hours upon hours, even sometimes call in from work. But hey, you know, you're playing, you know, all these Final Fantasy games, and then Maximum Carnage came out for the Super Nintendo. And then I remember, you know, I didn't have the Sega Genesis at the same time. I just had the Super Nintendo. You know, I was first out on my own and poor, and Mortal Kombat came out. You had all these influx of games, and then I started getting heavy into Madden. The beauty of these were there was no hidden message or political statements being made. You had all these magazines back in the day, like Game Enforcer, that I had a subscription to. And ultimately, I would move up into the 2000s with Game Informer, which they became irrelevant. Now all of a sudden, they're relevant, talking about Ghost of Yota, whatever you want to call it. I like how Hypnotic calls it Ghost of Antifa. That's hilarious. But even in the 90s, as the 90s progressed, you had the Nintendo 64, and Madden started becoming bigger and bigger to me. And then you had other break-off games. And then ultimately, in 2001, I got the Xbox. My wife bought me the Xbox, and you know, I ran away with that one, Knights of the Old Republic and all these other great games, Ninja Techni or whatever it was called. I think that's what it was called. And then, and then my 40s hit, my 30s and 40s, you had the Xbox 360, which to me, the Xbox 360 may be the greatest console of all time, in my opinion. And then obviously I hit my 40s with the Xbox One, and now that I'll just say I'm past 50, and I have the Xbox Series X and the PS5. And as you know, Xbox not really keeping up with the times when it comes to everything going on with all the price gouging and shit that they're pulling. But, I think you have to go back to June 2020 when I believe it, to me, that's when I think it started with The Last of Us Part 2. And as you know, we lost Joel. I mean, you've heard all this before, but I think that somehow the identity of these video game developing companies, it just got lost. It was okay for Naughty Dog to throw in the fact that, what was it, Abby beat Joel to death, and it got rid of one of our favorite freaking characters of all time in Joel. I mean, and I remember playing the first Last of Us just being blown away, but then like getting forced to play this Last of Us Part 2, and it's like, what the shit? And you could see it. You could see as you're controlling Ellie and the relationships and all this, you could see the writing on the wall, and somewhere it just got worse. And it's like, I don't know who the first one was to drink the Kool-Aid, but my first real experience would be Naughty Dog with The Last of Us Part 2. And what's sad is, let's be honest, I mean, even the advertisement gave you a lot of Joel in the advertisement to more or less, I'm going to say, lie to us that he was a huge part of the game, and he was ganked at the beginning. And it's just like, yeah, what happened to these developing companies? Where did they turn? Was it certain government agencies that were funding these private companies that were paying these idiots to put this progressive shit in here? What audience are you aiming at? What percentage do you think that these progressive shit libs are a part of? I mean, it's not all the left. I mean, and it's not all the right. That, it's just, you get a specific target, and all of a sudden you just target that one narrative, and you forget all about who is the group that actually puts you where you're at now. And it doesn't matter. It's like message over market value. It's like, no matter what, you're going to preach your message, and no matter what, you're going to ram it down our throats, and you expect us to buy it, and we're not buying it. We're not playing it. We're not going to take any part of it because it's shit. As far as the first Gamergate, I'm not that familiar with it back in the day. I just remember that some of my favorite titles I already deemed at the time untouchable. Ubisoft, they weren't going to drink the Kool-Aid. I can't say Bethesda so much. I really can't. I don't think, I think they still give you options and give you enough choice. But, obviously Naughty Dog, we see where they went with The Last of Us Part 2. We see where they're going with the Heretic, the Heretic Prophet. But I always felt that my games were untouchable. And then I thought BioWare, no way BioWare is going to drink the Kool-Aid. No way they're going to sell out. And they did. And that's what's so fucked up about the whole thing is like, Ubisoft. Let's start with Ubisoft. I mean, I loved Ubisoft. I loved the Prince of Persia. Wasn't a big Far Cry fan, but in 2007 when Assassin's Creed came out, that put Ubisoft, in my opinion, on the map. It pushed serious status. Already at that time, BioWare was my favorite. We had already had the likes of Jade Empire and Knights of the Old Republic, and we were getting on deck with a new Mass Effect. And guys, it was BioWare and Ubisoft that I thought to myself, man, at least they're untouchable. And they weren't. A major example with BioWare is the constant lies that the journos, or as Vera Dark put it, the journalists would put. They keep calling, at the time, you had the Kotakus, the IGNs, and whatever. You had them constantly shilling for Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and how many of them called it back to form? You had them just lying their asses off constantly. And what's funny is they were using their same regurgitated lines, calling it back to form. And they swore by it, and if you didn't like it, you were a racist, you were a fascist, you were all these different things that, they could call you because you didn't agree with the narrative set down by a game that made everyone in it pansexual. And I gotta say, there's just nothing natural or organic about it. And it's so frustrating when you put so much money, so much of your video game time into these companies, and they are failing, and they're doing it to themselves, and it's hysterical. What is the definition of insanity? repeating the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. And I have to say that these progressive development teams, they're doing the same thing over and over in every game and expecting that this time they're going to strike gold with that progressive crowd. But every time they release these pieces of shit, this progressive crowd is nowhere to be found. The problem is, it was no longer about making money with these studios, which makes absolutely no sense. And if you're the CEO of these places like a Naughty Dog, which is like Neil Druckmann, I guess. I think he's a president. Who gives a shit. But then you had Ubisoft, obviously, and BioWare. Like, whoever these CEOs are, how can you sit back and watch this progressive messaging not make you any money? I think the last real big amount of money that Ubisoft even made was Assassin's Creed Valhalla in 2020, which netted them over $1 billion, I think, in profit. But of course, given all the loot and all the different things for sale, I bought into it. I loved the cosmetics. I'm vain that way. But the problem is, it became a cesspool for this progressive preaching that you couldn't escape it. Like, we were watching television shows that we watched for years that started doing this. I'm like, okay, well, I tell my wife, I'm not playing. I'm gonna go play a video game. And I buy a new game and it's in it. And thank God for like the Dr. Disasters, the Asmongold's, Hypnotic, Smash JTs, and Demions, and Legendary Drops, and Vera Dark. All these people that come out here and help, and they have saved me a shit ton of money, and I can't thank them enough. And like the last 5 or 6 years, the message seemingly is far exceeding the market value that these games can give. I mean, for some reason, it's so much more important for these developers to push this message, this progressive message of their own views into these games, and it matters very little to them at the time if the game succeeds or not. And the problem is they're finding out that they're losing their jobs in droves with the mass layoffs going around all these video game developing companies because of this very shit. And I don't get it. You don't want to succeed financially because your message is more important. And that just makes no sense. That in itself is insane. And these are games like a South of Midnight, an Unknown 9 Awakening, The Last of Us Part 2, again, like I'd mentioned previously, and Ghost of Antifa, according to Hypnotic. And then you have the Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet, and then Assassin's Creed Shadows. I mean, there are so many more. I could continue on, but those are even the bigger failures that I'm not even bringing up. But the problem is like, let's take Naughty Dog, for instance, with the Heretic Prophet. They're going to eat their own shit, and I don't understand why they're okay with it. It's not working. How do you not look around, examine, and study what's happening to these video game companies, these other developers that are failing miserably, and you're still going to pump this shit out knowing that the analytics of actual gamers aren't going to want to buy your shit, especially Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet. The long-running IPs that have taken the biggest hits, Dragon Age series. Let's go there with the Dragon Age the Velguard, led by Corinne Bush. That game was so ridiculously preachy, so woke in a sense that everyone, like I said, was a pansexual in the game, I guess. So organic. But the problem is no matter what you did, you were going to be preached to about the message that they felt they had to put in this game because it was more important to them. It didn't matter how long the Dragon Age series had been going on, which I believe is all the way back to 2008 when you first became the Grey Warden. The BioWare name has been completely drug in the mud. And the thing is now with this company, the studio, you have EA now looking to sell off BioWare, it seems. And who's going to buy it? I mean, who wants a company that has butchered their last 3 games? When is the last time BioWare made money? Dragon Age Inquisition? Rather you are left-winged or right-winged in your political views, the new administration that is here is offering up a new direction. And I don't care who you vote for. I don't care what way politically you lean. You have to, in some way, even if you would never admit it, you have to in some way agree that the direction that video games are starting to head now back on the correct trajectory is a far, far past and much needed way of I am excited now that at least now DEI is in fact turning into DIE, and it is dying, and it's a good thing. It needs to. I don't mind the choices of DEI as long as it being organic. Like Baldur's Gate 3 was one of the best at it, in my opinion. You had all the choices right in front of you. You didn't have to settle on a certain way. Yes, you could say Dragon Age the Veilguard gave you choices, but even those choices were linear and it had a cost. I mean, Jesus. Another one I could throw in there is Obsidian's Avowed. Just absolute ridiculous. And there is a reason these games are bombing. And again, the message is still more important. And that makes absolutely no sense. This video is basically asking you, what do you want to see in a video game again? Do you miss the choice? Do you miss not having to be preached to, but carve out your own story? You can carve out your own story in some of these forced progressive games, but even then it's still a story according to their progressive ways. You cannot carve out a game like you could in, let's say, Elder Scrolls Skyrim. I gotta say that, I'm looking forward to games returning to normalcy, and it's something that was long overdue. What is it you want to see in a video game nowadays, and what is it you don't want to see in video games now? Hopefully we'll see it in upcoming GTA 6, which I believe still supposed to be May of 2026 according to now, but we'll see. I've been seeing kind of hints of a delay. I'm sure there'll be one more delay, but I'm very wary about release dates, and also pre-orders is just a no-go for me. But guys, that's really all I had. I'm just tired of, I don't purchase games anymore. I try Game Pass, even though Game Pass, the Xbox choices are absolute ass. But you're seeing it in everything anymore, and you just can't escape. And it's sad, because I just want to get back to what video games made me feel like as a kid and in my young adult life. And I'm just worried that we're never going to see it again. But anyway, guys, that's really all I had. Thank you so much for sticking this longer video out. I sincerely appreciate it. Please like the video, help us out in that algorithm. Please feel free to subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting or Gaming Geeks Live. And if you didn't do any of those and you just put up with this longer rant, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for joining. And to all you gamers out there, all love, and I'm outro.